Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to learn these 7 strategies for more effective virtual meetings with Molly, and I'm so happy that everyone is here. Um, just a few housekeeping things. Just please make sure that you are muted when you're not speaking, but at the end, if you wanted to unmute yourself to ask a question, that's fine. But during the presentation, just double check that you're on mute. And also, if you do have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat window and we will get through as many as possible at the end. And yeah, I'm so happy you're all here. And really quickly, I'll introduce myself and then I will introduce our guest. So my name's Emily. I'm the marketing manager at Arbite, and we have communication solutions for small to mid-sized businesses. And yeah, I'm so excited to be presenting today in this webinar series where we focus on communication in small to mid-sized businesses. So now I am very excited to introduce our guest, Mollie Lannen. So Mollie is the president of CW Print and Design and the vice president of Eternity. So CW Print and Design is a women-led digital print shop in Barre, Vermont, providing professional, quick turnaround printing and design services for small businesses and nonprofits. They work with individuals and small teams who want to foster trust and confidence in their marketing efforts. And Eternity builds engaging and responsive websites that look beautiful on any device for businesses, tourism, hospitality, and nonprofits. And their team is absolutely crazy about crafting digital experiences in Burlington, Vermont that balance beauty with utility and successfully connect you to your audience. Your website should be your best business investment, not an expense. I agree. In 2011, she was awarded the SBA Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award, and both of her companies have won numerous industry awards, as well as winning the Best of Business Awards for both industries. She's married to Mike Lannen, and they have a 7-year-old daughter, Claire, and 3-year-old daughter, Ella. Their family is currently in the process of building their dream home in Berlin, Vermont. And her interests outside of making the world a better place through print and design are reading and listening to business development books and podcasts, community involvement, and coffee. Her keys to success are listening, keeping things simple, and having a positive attitude. And I'm so happy that I met her through LinkedIn and that she's here with us today. So with that, I will let you take it away, Mollie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Emily, and thanks everybody for being here. So today we're going to review my 7 strategies for effective virtual meetings. And hopefully by the end of today, you will be able to hold virtual meetings that maximize the time of the attendees, prevent Zoom fatigue, and spur meaningful action. So I wanted to start off by finding out who here finds that they multitask when they are doing a meeting online. So Emily just launched a poll, and if you could just answer that. Yes, you're guilty, your mind tends to wander, or you're 100% focused. Do you multitask when you're doing a meeting online? You can be truthful. We're all friends here. Emily, do you have the results?
It looks like the majority of people so far, we have 71% saying, yes, I'm guilty of multitasking, and 43% have said sometimes they multitask. So,
but nobody's 100% focused when we're on online meetings. And I'm hoping that by the time we share all these strategies today, that will change a little bit for you. So today we're going to review these 7 strategies to help you combat the Zoom fatigue and get the most out of your meeting. So let's talk a little bit about Zoom fatigue. What is Zoom fatigue and how did we get here? This is a photo of a common virtual meeting, and you've probably seen something like this before. People are bored, they're disengaged. Josh down here on the bottom row, he's texting or maybe watching TikTok. Allison over here literally is calling it in, like she's probably going skiing. Kate here in the middle, her face is saying, why am I even here? And when Kate is making this face in your meeting, you know that something has gone wrong. So What does Zoom fatigue sound like in real life? So when you're inviting somebody to a meeting, they might say something like, "Ugh, another Zoom workshop." And when you're planning a virtual meeting, you might find yourself thinking, I don't know how to keep my audience engaged over the screen, or how do I get my clients to want to pay to talk to me virtually when they're already online all day for work? You might say to yourself, I'm hosting a Zoom meeting, but I'm just so over this. You're waiting for everything to go back to normal, back to in person. And this is really dangerous because online meetings, they're not going to go away just because the pandemic ends. Virtual meetings are here to stay. Many offices are not going to go back to in person. They're going to be forever remote. The ease and convenience of online meetings has a lot of value. There's no commute time, there's no distance issues, there's no travel expenses. And now we're more easily connected, even though we're physically far apart. So these strategies will help you get more out of all of these virtual meetings. The biggest obstacle people face with virtual meetings is that we're treating them differently than we would in person meetings. This has to do with our mindset around online meetings. So the first shift has to happen here. You have to treat online meetings just like you would treat in-person meetings. If you can think back to what you would do for an in-person meeting, you dress nice. You wouldn't be wearing pajama pants. You'd brush your hair. You'd prepare ahead of time. You'd put away your phone and your email. So start mentally dialoguing about your meetings the same way you would when you talk about in-person meetings. So I physically say things out loud like, I'm going to go meet with Jill, or I'm heading to this networking event. Even though I'm not going anywhere, like I'm still here in these four walls, I'm changing my mindset to talk about the way that I'm going to an event. The other part that affects your mindset is your space. So if the place you are having your virtual meetings looks and feels like home, that's how you're going to treat it. So instead, think of your background the same way you prepare your office if you were going to have somebody over for a meeting, even if your office is in your bedroom for now. When you're on a virtual platform, you're inviting all of the attendees into your space. So you want to make sure it's inviting. The final part of mindset is that you want to learn to be an active listener. It's so easy to just zone out while you're in a virtual meeting, as though you're just watching it on YouTube later. But you need to treat it like you would a normal meeting and actively listen to everyone who is speaking. Your second strategy is to prepare for your meeting. So this is a lot more than just putting on a clean shirt and sitting down at your computer at 9 a.m. You need to prepare ahead of time. This is just like what you would do for an in-person meeting. So study the agenda ahead of time and be prepared to contribute to the meeting. You want to print out any documents or worksheets that you might need. And if you're presenting from a slide deck, you want to have a printout of your presentation, just like you would if you were doing that same presentation in person. You want to make sure that you are prepared to be comfortable. While it might not feel awkward in person to politely excuse yourself for a moment to use the restroom or refill your coffee, you probably wouldn't want to do it in a way that would disrupt the meeting. But when you turn off your video in the middle of a virtual meeting to do these things, it's the equivalent of just getting up abruptly while someone is talking and leaving the room, and it will disrupt the meeting. And when one person does this, all of a sudden more people will do this. So prepare to be comfortable. When I sit down on my computer for a meeting, I make sure I have everything I need at arm's reach. I have multiple cups of coffee and water and tea. I have tissues and lip gloss and hand lotion, and I have a snack, and I have pen and paper. You also need to prepare your Zoom settings and other technology pieces. You want to feel comfortable using the technology, so it's okay to take some time just to practice. I open up Zoom the very beginning of my day just to test everything out. How's my lighting today? How's my background? Is my camera and microphone working? This 2 minutes at the beginning of every day saves me a ton of time later on, knowing my technology is always going to work. Always want to check for software updates well in advance of your meeting and test your settings out every time it updates. If you haven't dived into your Zoom settings, I recommend you do so. You can touch up your appearance. You can enter every meeting without any camera or microphone issues, and you can ensure that your setup is the best for your experience. Finally, we're going to talk about background. People compliment my background every time I get on a call, and that's because I designed it with intention. I intentionally made it feel like my professional home. It's welcoming to you and calming to me, and I've also staged it. I've staged it with my branding, so there are subtle reminders of my brand when people are looking at me. And I've staged it with other items that I can use to spark conversations. The third strategy is commuting. The one thing that's weird about all these online meetings is that we've lost our commute time. Maybe you remember what commuting to a meeting was like, right? You were driving in your car or taking a bus to meet a client or attend a networking event. Can you envision it? You were listening to the radio, letting your mind wander, parking the car, walking to the venue. You can smell that fresh air. It was nice, right? Even if pre-pandemic you hated your commute, this world of no commute time is wearing down our mental health. So maybe your commute to your meeting was just walking down the hallway to the conference room. Even that is more commute than we're giving ourselves now. So I recommend you rethink your virtual commute. What I do is I'm usually at work and I have a pretty large store. So I do a couple laps around my office. I walk over to the water cooler, fill my cup of water, and then I go the long way back to my office. And then I get up again, get a second cup of water, walk back, go over, start the coffee maker, walk back. And so I get my body moving the same way I would when I was commuting to an office. When I work from home, I do the same thing. I take a 5-minute walk outside. Maybe I'm just taking out the trash or whatever, but I'm getting my body moving. And I always space out my meetings. I give myself at least 15 to 30 minutes to get away from my computer and prepare between them. This fourth strategy is related back to that first one about mindset, and that is to be fully present. As human beings, even though it's been statistically shown that multitasking makes us less productive, we've still convinced ourselves that somehow it makes us more productive, and it's really hard to not multitask. So going back to treating it like you would an in-person meeting, in-person meetings were a lot harder to multitask because in in-person meetings, there were limited distractions. So you have to do the same when you prepare for your virtual meeting. You need to take everything off of your desk, both your physical desk and your desktop on your computer, that's not needed for your meeting. You need to close out all the non-meeting related windows on your computer. You need to print out your handouts if you can, because if you have them up on your screen and you're switching between the windows, you will find it way more easy to get distracted. So remove all the other distractions from your space. So if you're working at home, that might mean you have to close a door, lock it to keep the kids and dogs out, and turn off your phone. If your computer has a do not disturb mode, turn it on so that way notifications are not disturbing you and distracting you while you're in your meeting. Finally, you need to change your view on Zoom to best fit the situation. Most people are either using the default Zoom view or you're using the gallery view. However, when you're watching someone present, sometimes the speaker view is actually better. Because do you need to be looking at the tiny squares and figuring out what's going on in Jane's background? Or does Joe have a cat on his head? It's okay to change your view settings during the meeting. Group conversations, that gallery view is perfect. One-to-one meetings, you want to do speaker view. If the presenter is doing a screen share, you can do side-by-side speaker view. And you can change it throughout the meeting. You don't have to look at Zoom the exact same way for the whole 1 hour. One last tip here is that human beings are kind of vain. So if you find yourself getting distracted by your own video, you could actually right click on it and hide your self view. And then you can be way more present because you're not being distracted by yourself. Strategy 5 is to use the tools. Technology has given us so many tools and it does take time and practice to get to use them correctly. So when you're presenting, use an engaging slide deck. The same can go for just a regular office meeting. It doesn't have to be a presentation. You can actually use your slide deck to keep the agenda moving. You can use timers to keep everybody on task. You can use visual timers because those are best because everybody knows how much time is available for the topic. So when you're having a conversation, it will keep people from over talking about one topic so that we can keep everything on pace. If you have a speaking role during the meeting, make sure you're prepared and that you've rehearsed ahead of time. And you can also use a teleprompter app so that way you get all of your points correct. Zoom and other platforms have technology built in, such as breakout rooms, a chat box, and the built-in polls. So you want to use these tools to your advantage. For group discussions on Zoom, it's best not to have more than a dozen people on the screen. If your group's larger than this, you really want to use breakout rooms to segment them into smaller groups. 3 to 5 people per room is best for breakout rooms, and breakout rooms are a great way for open networking during a larger meeting. The chat box is a great place for people to ask questions and to add quick thoughts without interrupting the speaker. You can also use the chat box for brainstorming. You can ask an open-ended question and have people put their answer in the chat box, which is way easier to get everybody's opinion versus having them mute and unmute. Polls are great for multiple choice questions like we did at the beginning of this meeting. You can use them as icebreakers. You can use them to garner an idea of the type of people that are in the room, and you can also use them to vote on different ideas. There are other tools outside of the platforms that can be utilized, such as like Poll Everywhere or similar plugins that work with your slide deck. They allow you to interact with your audience in different ways. All right, strategy 6 is one of my favorites because as a printer, I have seen firsthand how using print can elevate a meeting. Just like at a conference being held in person, printed materials will support your presentation. So if you are having a workshop or a webinar where people are signed up in advance, try to get their mailing address and you can actually send them physical materials ahead of time. You can send them a gift box, you can include like branded merchandise, you can use, include props that they want to use during your workshop, and you can mail them ahead of time. And there are also people that only really learn by physically writing things down. They need to jot and they make notes. They don't learn by just watching and listening. So if you're not including the note takers, you might be missing a huge segment of your audience. Which leads us to how to utilize print during your meeting. If you aren't able to send materials ahead of time in the mail, you can send electronic documents in advance and ask them specifically to print them out themselves. You can reference the materials during the meeting and have people write notes. If you want people to use props, you can actually ask them to find things ahead of time that they might have around the house or office, like their favorite party hat or their favorite coffee mug, or things that they can, show on the screen. So they might have, something that they use for work that they could show as part of like a demonstration. Afterwards, use your registration information to mail participants a thank you card or any other materials that might be relevant, such as your business card, more details about what was shared during your presentation, or fun swag with your logo on it. Our final strategy is follow-up. So at the end of your meeting, you want to assign homework or action steps. Doing this keeps everybody accountable to what was discussed during the meeting. If you're having a recurring meeting with a team, then you can assign specific tasks that they need to be have completed and report back at the next meeting. Always send a thank you card or thank you email following up on whatever was discussed during the meeting. And then you want to make sure you're connecting outside the meeting with any new contacts. Look for them and their companies on LinkedIn, Facebook, or your favorite social media channel, or invite them to a virtual cup of coffee later. So if you follow all of these strategies, you'll find the Zoom is more like this. Everyone is engaged and they have a shared purpose. In this meeting that you're seeing here, the participants were encouraged to dress up. People are happy to be there and they are engaged with their cameras and they're really authentically present at the meeting. So as I've alluded, I've got some action steps for you guys today. The first is that after this meeting, I want you to create a pre-meeting ritual using these strategies that we talked about today. And I want you to think back to your in-person meetings and how you prepared, and think about how you can translate those into your new environment. Then the next time you're in a virtual meeting, I want you to set a visual timer on your screen. I use a timer called AS Timer Pro for Mac. And it just shows me a visual timer, and it doesn't necessarily have to have like any kind of distracting ding. And I use that as a mid-meeting check. When the timer goes off, I ask myself, am I engaged with this meeting that I'm attending? Or did I catch myself multitasking? And if so, I use it as a moment to reset. I close out any extra tabs or windows that I might have opened. I take a deep breath to get present again. I adjust my view settings because the meeting might have changed partway through and I'm not looking at it the right way. Finally, I want you to create a follow-up checklist. If you're the presenter, it should include sending thank you notes to the participants. And if you're a participant, send a thank you email to the presenter with any additional follow-up questions or feedback, including looking for connections on social media. And you want to do any homework or action steps that you received during the meeting that you attended. So those are my strategies. Thank you guys so much for being today, and I will be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you. That was amazing. And I will start off with a question.
Great.
So sometimes I have days where I just have like one meeting after another, and it's not often, but once in a while I'll have days like that. So I know you mentioned like scheduling and commute time.
Yeah.
Do you think that's beneficial to do it like before every meeting? And like work some days it's meetings and then also work. So do you have any recommendations for like how to balance days where you have a lot of meetings, also getting your work done, and then also making sure you take time to like give yourself that commute before a meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely I would space some time between everything. Somebody recently told me about this rule of like 25 to 5, doing a task for 25 minutes and then taking a 5-minute break. Because about 25 minutes is kind of as long as our attention span is. So if you're trying to give yourself at least a 5-minute break between different tasks, I think that that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I like that advice too. So another question is, how do you get yourself pumped up or excited for a meeting?
So I really think about the feelings I had about in-person meetings. And I found different strategies that kind of get me in that mindset. So I actually diffuse something that like just makes me happy and gets me in that same like it almost smells like a place that I used to sit and have coffee at with a lot of my clients. And so that gets me right in that same kind of mood. I when I present, I'm always standing, so I have a stand up down desk because I would never give a presentation in person sitting down at my desk. So I stand, so that helps get my energy up. Um, and then doing that walking, that like intentional, faux commute between meetings really helps kind of get the juices going. And
Yeah,
being
I
prepared for sure. I always am much more excited to attend something that I'm prepared for. So if you find that you don't know what you're going into for a meeting and you're not the person that's putting it together, ask in advance, like, hey, is there an agenda that I can review so that way I'm fully prepared for this meeting?
yeah, I really like the standing up advice. I never really thought about that, but when you're presenting in a meeting full of people, you would be sitting down. So that's I never thought about that. Another question we got is, how do you separate work from your personal life when your office space is your bedroom?
So there's a couple ways that you can do that. The one is to like make like a separate space, but say for example your bedroom is your office. I so a lot of people they have their bed and then they have like their desk against the wall, and so when you're on video, you see the bed behind you. I would maybe figure out a way to position my computer on top of the bed so that you're actually looking back at your desk. So then it feels less like a bedroom. At my house, I actually have like a laundry basket and I flip it upside down and I use it as like a stand for my laptop.
Yeah. Um, Another question we got, are there any specific items you recommend having or not having in your background? And then second part, do you think it's better to use a Zoom background or use your actual background?
So the first part about what to have or not to have is don't have anything in your background that you don't want to talk about. Um, so if you were to ask me about any single thing that you see in my background, I have a story I can tell about it and I use it as a conversation starter. But if there's something that you wouldn't have a story about or would be like kind of a weird story that you wouldn't want to tell people, like you don't want that inside your background. So that would be the things to not have, and the things to have would be things that you would want to talk about. And then what was the second part of that question?
Do you think it's better to use a Zoom background or your actual background?
I would say that to use your real background, as long as you're able to make it like professional and that it's not super distracting. The virtual backgrounds for some people actually take up bandwidth. So here in like rural Vermont, we a lot of people that attend our meetings, they don't have a whole lot of bandwidth. So if you're in a call and you've got 10 people and they all have virtual backgrounds, they're actually losing bandwidth on their side for being able to view it. So if you can get away with not having a virtual background, I would not do it. And it's kind of distracting when people go like this and their hands disappear.
Yeah, I
That's my
didn't.
preference.
Um, and I have a question, another question. Have you found there's like a secret formula for like the length of time a meeting should be before that Zoom fatigue kicks in or that like attention span runs out? I know you mentioned 25 minutes, but some meetings
Um,
just
yeah,
go longer.
so I think a really good kind of frame of reference is to think about how long the meeting would take in person, and then it shouldn't take as long. So if it was normally an hour meeting, you should be able to get it done in 45 minutes, because you can be more efficient on the computer. So just because it used to take an hour doesn't mean it still has to take an hour.
Yeah, great. That's all the questions we got so far. Are there any more questions before we wrap it up? It doesn't look like it, but yeah, Molly's email is there. So I'm sure if you do have any more questions, she'd be happy to answer them. And you can also reach me. We'll be sending out, oh, this was recorded. So you will be receiving a recording in your email in the next couple days of this presentation. So you can reach out with any questions then if you have any. But that is all we have for you today. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And thank you so much, Molly, for sharing these tips. I learned a lot.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Okay. Thanks, everyone. I hope you all have an amazing day. And yeah, you'll be getting a recording soon. So just keep an eye out for that.